Nintendo has had an amazing lineup of consoles over the years, and time again has proven that a console's hardware isn't always the be-all and end-all, as a creative idea of good execution can make all the difference. They most notably proved that of the Wii and more recently of the Switch, as both consoles have been a huge success despite the notable difference in hardware compared to competition like Sony and Microsoft. Not all Nintendo consoles are perfect, however, as one console in particular stands out as not being so innovative or well executed. Now, the Wii U had all the odds stacked in its favour. It was released a year before the PS4 and Xbox One, making it more distinct hardware-wise on release, and of course it was the second console to the Wii, which was Nintendo's most popular console at the time by far. But despite this, the Wii U flopped big time, and only sold around 13 million units compared to the original Wii's over 100 million. Looking back, it's easy to see why this happened. The ads were terrible and seemed right at home on a knockoff Disney Channel.
This is the one my brother has. They fight with you. I'm getting one of these.
Gamepad was incredibly ugly and way too big, and the gimmick of the console was pretty unsatisfactory even for something back in 2012. Despite all these negatives and more, I actually grew up with a Wii U, since my parents didn't really seem to care about all its mishaps. Instead, they saw it was able to play Wii and Wii U games, and decided to buy it for that reason alone. And although I refuse to defend this abysmal console, there is another major factor in Nintendo's appeal that I think needs to be mentioned for the Wii U, and that's their games. Nintendo Land was a launch title for the Wii U, and because of that, it was only ever going to be able to sell 13 million copies maximum. And that's if every single person that bought the console also bought Nintendo Land, which is already a bummer for the game, but it did end up selling over 5 million copies, which for the circumstances is pretty good. This also made it the 5th highest selling Wii U game, and less than a million sales off of beating mainline Mario games like Super Mario 3D World and New Super Mario Bros. U. Even Mario Kart 8, which was the highest selling game on the console, only sold around 8 million copies overall, which is pretty measly when compared to its success on Switch, where it sold over 50 million copies. So although Nintendo Land sold fairly well considering the circumstances, there's only so much a launch title can do for a failing console. So after playing Nintendo Land when it came out and going back and playing it now, I'm going to tell you all about it. And I'll also explain why I think Nintendo Land was a great launch title with a lot of creativity, but was wasted on such an uncreative and unsuccessful console. To see why Nintendo made Nintendo Land, we need to look back at the Wii U's much more successful younger sibling. As you all probably know by now, the Wii launched with one of Nintendo's most successful games ever, Wii Sports. Most Wiis were sold with Wii Sports, making purchasing the console more appealing, and also displayed all the Wii's creative features through the game. So not only was Wii Sports a fun game to play with family and friends, but it also fully utilised the Wii Remote and basically advertised the potential the Wii had. It was an incredibly creative idea with great execution. Now, if we look at its older, uglier, and much less successful older sibling, it's not quite got the same appeal. Compared to Wii Sports, Nintendo Land was already missing the mark before it even released. Although Nintendo stated many times that Nintendo Land was the Wii U's version of Wii Sports, they decided to make one fatal change between the two. Instead of Nintendo Land releasing for free with the Wii U, like Wii Sports did for the Wii, they decided to add Nintendo Land to a deluxe package of the Wii U, which costed an extra £50. Obviously, this did not help with Nintendo Land's sales, as most people would have bought the normal bundle and probably decided to buy the Wii U's more recognisable launch titles like New Super Mario Bros. U. So what exactly is Nintendo Land? Well, it's a theme park style party game where you can play all different types of attractions themed around different Nintendo franchises like Super Mario and Legend of Zelda. There are 12 attractions overall, 3 team attractions where you can play with or without people, 3 competitive attractions where it's required to play with other people, and 6 solo attractions. But my favourite game out of all the multiplayer games had to be Metroid Blast. In Metroid Blast, you have one player controlling the ship using the gamepad, and the other players using the Wii Remote and nunchuck. The controls are actually quite smart, as you have the person on the gamepad moving the camera of the gamepad's gyro controls, while the players on the ground move the nunchuck and aim by pointing the Wii Remote at the TV. Both are quite easy to use and work really well. There are quite a few small mechanics to the game, like the ship being able to hold the fire button to charge a missile at the enemy player, while players on the ground can charge up a measly grenade that takes 2 working days to blow up. However, the players on the ground also have a dodge button, making you look like you came straight out of the Matrix movies, while the ship has a dash. Also, the players on the ground can grapple across the map using these pink dots, which is a big deal because if not, your character would take a couple months just to run to the other side of the map. And talking about maps, there are 5 different unique areas, and they're all pretty fun. Some more fun than others, but still fun. Also, if you're sick of the air versus ground mode, you can even play with all players on the ground, just to make it more interesting. Or even play missions together, where you fight off enemies from the Metroid franchise. I absolutely loved this attraction. It's great to play with friends or family, and does a great job at displaying how much fun you can have on a gamepad that looks like I can go sledding on. So yeah, this is definitely my favourite attraction in Nintendo Land, and is a must play if you own the game. Next game I want to talk about is another team attraction called The Legend of Zelda Battle Quest. The player on the gamepad has a bow, and the players of the Wii Remote and Nunchuck use the Master Sword. You play through different levels against waves of different enemies, from these explosive enemies that look like a mix between a creeper and Wobbuffet from Pokemon, to boss fights against much bigger enemies. This mode has both player types working together to not lose their lives by playing on each other's weaknesses. Different types of enemies can change up this dynamic, however, as you have enemies that can only be hit in certain directions by the swordsman, and there's enemies with bows that will snipe the person on gamepad without the help of the swordsman's shield. Elements like this keep the game fresh, and overall it's quite a fun mode to play with a mate or two. The only thing I wish it had was some sort of versus mode like with Metroid Blast. The last team attraction is Pikmin Adventure, which has 1 person play as Olimar and up to another 4 players play large versions of Pikmin. There's also a versus mode in this one, but I wasn't really a fan of it as it seemed a bit too chaotic. Like I would genuinely have no idea what's going on. The goal would be to collect more sweets than another team, but half the time I can't even distinguish them from Olimar's Pikmin. And then you have all these random enemies fighting all of yous, and the players can also fight each other and drop sweets endlessly, making the whole experience more manic. It just wasn't that fun. The team mode is the opposite, however, as you have different missions where you have to take out enemies and bosses to progress. These levels are pretty easy to get the hang of, and a good variation of different enemy types that could be stronger, quicker, and have unique moves. Throughout the missions, players can also collect sap and level up, making them stronger and giving them new moves. This was probably the team attraction I played the least out of the 3. I feel like if I had played the Pikmin games, I might have appreciated this attraction a lot more, but not the versus mode. That can rot in hell. And now we move on to the competitive games, the place where friendships go to die. Mario Chase is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just a game of tag where Mario's always it. Mario gets a 10-second head start, and the Toads using the TV try and catch him as quickly as possible. If a timer runs out, Mario wins. Simple enough, but it does have some small features to mention. First is the Toads can actually leap, giving them a bit of an advantage when trying to viciously rugby tackle Mario. Secondly, the person playing Mario has a map on the gamepad where they can see their location and the Toads, while the Toads only have a meter system telling them if they're getting hotter or colder. And thirdly, the gamepad has a camera you can turn on during the match, for some reason. This game can be quite fun, but one thing to note is it's a lot more fun with multiple people chasing, as the game replaces the empty spaces with AI Yoshis that are about as useful during tag as a baby walking their first steps. But except for that, another pretty fun mode with albeit less astounding features to do with the gamepad and in general gameplay mechanics. Luigi's Ghost Mansion gives Luigi the spotlight, or should I say, the flashlight.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
In this game, one player plays as the ghost on gamepad, and the others play as ghost trackers of the Wii Remote. The more the ghost tracker's remote vibrates, the closer the ghost is. The ghost is also completely invisible unless some convenient lightning exposes the ghost as the fraud they are. The more the ghost gets flashlighted, the more health they lose, but if they capture all the ghost trackers, they win. The ghost trackers can also revive each other using their flashlights, but they will eventually run out of battery throughout the match, and will need to collect batteries that spawn the map to get more. This is definitely one of the best minigames on Nintendo Land. The tension of having the Wii Remote gradually rumble more and more until you're literally spinning on the spot, flashing everything in your sight, to the classic Luigi Mansion-esque music, to even the funny moments of the ghost being exposed by lightning. This mode is just a lot of fun, and definitely one of the highlights for me. Animal Crossing Sweet Day is the last multiplayer minigame on Nintendo Land, and it's basically a better and more interesting version of Mario Chase. It involves one player using the gamepad to control 2 guards using both analog sticks, while the players on the TV play random animals trying to collect as many sweets as possible. The animals start off as much faster than the guards, but the more sweets they hold, the slower they get. If the animals get captured 3 times, the guards win, but if the animals collect a specific number of sweets, they win. I honestly think they could have just scrapped Mario Chase for this mode and just made something else in its place. But I also get they were probably forced into making an attraction about Mario, because it's obviously their most popular franchise. I just really like the risk versus reward factor with how many sweets you you can carry, making every decision to carry an extra sweet potentially very costly. Also, the player collecting the sweets has a lot of potential to bait the gamepad player into leaping for them, and the guards are easy to move and pull off good positioning with. This mode is another one of my favourites in this game, and it's just a blast to play. Now let's move on to the final 6 games, the solo attractions. This is where the game starts to go a bit downhill. First one I want to talk about is the Octopus dance attraction, which is definitely the worst attraction in this game for me. It's basically just a rhythm game where you have to copy the movements of the person next to you, and the speed and difficulty gets higher the more you go on. Now this attraction is pretty short. There are 5 rounds overall, plus a bonus round for some reason. The bonus round doesn't add anything unique, it's just a normal round. Don't really know why it's there, but sure. And during the later rounds, an octopus starts getting in your way a little bit and shooting bits of ink on the screen to try and distract you. But that's pretty much it for any added difficulty. So overall, this attraction gets really repetitive really quickly and doesn't offer much replayability after beating it. Also, this is one of the only games that would barely work for me. Multiple times while playing, the gamepad would need recalibrated. And even when I was playing, having to hold the gamepad up and facing the TV while playing was just awkward and felt uncomfortable. So yeah, this game was definitely a miss for me. Next up is Yoshi's Fruit Cart, which involves drawing on the gamepad to move Yoshi and grab the items you see on the TV. The concept is extremely simple, but it's still pretty fun. The game does add obstacles and new mechanics to make it more interesting though, like number ordered fruit that you have to collect, and even pit holes that will make you lose a life instantly. So yeah, an extremely basic game that you'd more likely see on mobile than in a Wii U game, but it's not offensively bad or anything, and at least it actually works as intended. Donkey Kong's Crash Course is next, and it basically takes the original Donkey Kong game's level design and dials it to 11. It's just one massive course that you're trying to fly through as quickly as possible, and this attraction takes full advantage of the gamepad's limited features, making you use the gyro controls to move, the mic to blow in to move platforms, and other controls to move platforms too, like the left and right triggers on the analog sticks. So the wooden wire thingy or whatever the hell this is supposed to be is what you have to get to the end of the course, but it also just happens to be really fragile. So if you tip over or bang the top of it too hard, you lose a life, which is pretty hard to avoid when you're speeding down a course, pressing buttons to move platforms in time. And yeah, this game is pretty fun. Definitely has more replay value compared to the other solo attractions. Pretty difficult and has a lot of content to play through. And the drawn copy of your best run showing up when you play again is a nice touch. Reminds me of the Ghost data in Mario Kart. Balloon Trip Breeze is yet another mobile game ported to the Wii U. It's an auto-scroll game where you basically fly through the level and avoid obstacles, using the stylus on the gamepad to direct the wind that's moving you. And you can also press the screen to cause a shockwave to break objects or hurt enemies. And that's pretty much it. I'm honestly kind of surprised you don't have to blow into the mic for this game, but I'm happy you don't, so I think most people would probably end up passing out of how much you have to stay in the air. You do have obstacles and enemies flying about, and a giant fish you can bait into trying to eat you, which is pretty random, and you can get randomized power-ups that can range from slowing down time to making you tiny. Once again though, this is a very basic attraction that's just a bit of quick fun for 10 minutes or so. Nothing that impressive, but like the others similar to it, it's not really trying to be. But finally we get to the more interesting solo attractions, and I'm gonna start with Takamaru's Ninja Castle. Now this game actually has a bit of lore behind it. The name used in the title is the protagonist of a game called the Mysterious Murasame Castle, which was a game that released exclusively in Japan in 1986 on the Famicom, which is basically a Japan-only version of the NES. The game was praised quite highly and was seen as a more action-packed counterpart to Zelda games of the time. Keep in mind, the only official release of this game outside of Japan was digitally on the 3DS, which isn't even available anymore. So to see this game be referenced in an attraction on Nintendo Land of all games is pretty random to say the least. But is the game actually fun? Well, out of all the solo attractions, I would say it's not just the most interesting, but the best. How it works is you have to hold the gamepad vertically and aim at the TV like you would with a Wii remote to move your reticle, except this Wii remote has put on quite a lot of weight. Then to throw shurikens, you have to swipe on the gamepad screen. The harder you swipe, the faster the shurikens move. Also, to reload, you just hold the gamepad upright. And that's about it. It's fairly simple, but works really well. And you just progress through these paper-style castle levels and shoot at any ninjas you come across. Some of them will throw shurikens like you, while some will throw bombs. And there's even some pretty cool boss fights in this as well. You can also use new weapons and abilities by drawing symbols on the gamepad after collecting scrolls, like being able to use bombs, the ability to shoot 3 projectiles at once, and even slowing down time. The biggest problem with this game though is the length, since it's pretty short and when you do beat it, you just replay it again but with less shurikens. But overall, I really like this game game, and it's definitely a standout when compared to the rest of the solo attractions. And last, but probably near least, we have Captain Falcon's Twister Race. Now, I did say that this was one of the more interesting solo attractions, but it's not really for the right reasons. Now, when I first saw it, I was expecting something quite fun, especially when the caption for it says, "Race at high speeds down a dangerous, twisting track." A Nintendo Land version of F-Zero, like, it has to be a bit of fun, right? Well, no, it sucks. The gameplay itself is boring, basically just involves you moving the gamepad left or right to steer. The speed you move at is criminal.
You're too slow!
And it doesn't even work properly. The amount of times I tried to play this and it would come up saying I need to recalibrate the gamepad was frustrating. It was somehow working less in the Octopus dance attraction. Also, the fact that this is the closest thing to a new F-Zero game in nearly 20 years is sad to see. At this point, Nintendo's just teasing the last 5 F-Zero fans in existence. So yeah, overall the solo attractions are pretty rough. There are a couple interesting ones, but for the most part they're pretty obsolete when compared to the multiplayer games. But thankfully the multiplayer games carry this game and make it a fun experience with friends or family, which at the end of the day is Nintendo's main goal of their consoles, especially for the Wii and Wii U. So I think in that sense the game really succeeded. So to sum the game up, Nintendo Land is an underappreciated gem in a dark, bug-infested, abhorrent cave that no one cares to visit anymore. It may not have been statistically or objectively better than Wii Sports, despite Nintendo wanting it to be of similar success, but it's still done the best it could in a bad situation, using the small amount of features in its disposal like the gamepad's gyro controls, the touchscreen, the mic, and how can I forget the incredible 4K quality camera. They really did try, and honestly I would like to see some form of Nintendo Land released for the Switch. If this is what they could do with this pile of shit, I wonder what they could do with something actually successful, but sadly, that'll probably never happen.